Right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for getting up so early and coming to this event. I hope you're having a good time so far. This event that we are here, obviously first to the festival, and it's a vision of mine that we have to make an addition to the festival of an academic value, research value, and I know Lee since 2017. We've been together in the Leadership Bluegrass class 2017, best class ever. And then in 2018, I was lucky enough to participate in a lecture which Greg gave, and I was completely in awe of both his knowledge and his personality. And then 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to meet Nate Olson from ETSU. And then I said, that's it, that's my holy trinity. And then I contact Conor here from UL, from the Irish Academy, and that's it. And that's how this event came about. I asked Lee to take a lead on what are we going to talk about. I sure hope that this event will continue into the next future and the next few years in the festival, and that you and us will all go home with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of sharing of our understanding and how we're going to make the future of string music at either side of the Atlantic better for all of us, and here for a better future. So let me welcome Lee Bidgood to take a lead on this event. Enjoy and make some music. Thank you.
Thanks, Uri. Thanks for coming out so early. It was not so easy for me. Probably harder for some of you all to be here. So I'm Lee Bidgood, and as a musician, I play bluegrass, old time, and early musics. And as a professor at East Tennessee State University's Department of Appalachian Studies, I teach courses in ethnomusicology and bluegrass, old time, and roots music studies. I lead a mandolin orchestra and a global string band. So you can see I kind of spread out from some of the cores of what we do in our program. But one of the things that I do is help organize the String Band Summit, which is a gathering that considers string band music across genre and geography. So that really meshes with our project here today. And I've been working with Greg on that project, and they held it there last year. It's going to be at MTSU. So keep a space in your mind open for spring 2025.
We don't have the date yet.
We're working on it.
Late March, early April, probably.
It's going to be great. So today we're talking about informal playing, jamming, the session. This could be so many different things, right? So that's why what I'm going to do is introduce some themes, kind of open some ways for us to think about this, like what are the functions of jams? What are the different kinds of jams that happen? The session mentality, who's in, who's out, right? There's so many different ways that can happen. So I'm going to introduce some things, and each of our panelist folks is going to bring some different lived experience, some report from some part of the world of playing informally, of jam, of session. So the one session that is most home for me these days is right down the street in Johnson City in Tennessee, where folks play old-time music every Tuesday at a brewery in town. And in addition to genre adherence, some leading participants in the jam really keep in the mix a lot of local repertory, things that were recorded by fiddlers, 100 years ago in our area, trying to make sure that those pieces are a part of the vocabulary, the discourse. Now, the jam scenes that Michelle Kisliak, some of y'all may have read her article about bluegrass jamming, she's going around at Bean Blossom in the campground, talking about how people, roam the campground looking for the jam, looking for the good crack, if we're going to use the local way of talking about it, right? And she talks about the unexpected and unrepeatable moments that happen sometimes late at night that you don't expect but are so amazing. That's one of the reasons why you stay up that late. So I write 3:30, it's going to be great, right? So In contrast, the places I've spent that I've seen jams in the Czech Republic with my work with folks there often seems to be a comfort of the expected and the repeated process, coming back together in the same place with the same people in the same pub with the same kind of beer. So at the same time, we have that comfort of continuity. Emily Williams Roberts is a scholar who's identified ways that bluegrass jams can be models of inclusion and that model accessibility and accommodation. And she points to some of the ways that we might learn from informal music action in our larger society. How could we make a society that's more accessible? She's also said she's more pessimistic these days, and she's looking at how people are excluded from jams. So she's kind of looking at the other side of that these days. I'm thinking there's so many different configurations, right? We can have a small circle jam. You can have the big circle jam, like where you go around and it's like the Aztec calendar. It takes you a whole year to go around the whole circle. I was in Ohio one time, and I stumbled into a room. It was like a ballroom, all filled with harps. The biggest circle of harps I've ever seen. It was like a circle of standing stones in Orkney or something. It was amazing. But you can also have a line jam, right? I've never heard of this till I was in New York one time. There's a bluegrass jam. And it was people on stage with microphones. I was like, what is this? This is not what I think of as a jam. That's more of a presentational performance, rather than something I think of as a jam is more participatory. But that's just where I come with it. I think a lot of people go to the Bean Blossom Festival and in Indiana, a big bluegrass homecoming event, and there's something called the jam, where people stand in line so they can play a tune with a house band, right? So there's all these different ways that people have of talking about this. One really important role, and Natalya is going to talk about this, of jams is to usher people over from being spectators to being participants, right? There's a a lot of learning that happens in sessions. People grow up and learn the music here and in the States, I think, in sessions. You learn the musical stuff and also the etiquette, right? How are you supposed to do this? You learn genre conventions, not just in music, but also in how you treat the music, right? All right, so I'm going to introduce everybody. That's my. Okay, there's a lot going on here. There's way too much for us to deal with, right? But we're gonna dive into some specifics, I'm going to introduce each person just so we can keep it from getting confusing, right? To help keep. It's early still, so instead of listing everyone and then coming back, I think that'd be confusing. So I'm going to introduce Natalya Zoe Weinstein, and many of you saw her yesterday at the Club Bay, rocking it out with John. She's a fiddler and singer. She's performing this weekend with her husband, John Cloyd Miller, and the duo Zoe and Cloyd. She's also an instructor in the traditional music program at Warren Wilson College in Asheville, North Carolina. And she holds an MA from Appalachian State University in Appalachian Studies with a concentration in music and culture. And you should stick around for her fiddle workshop that's going to happen right after this.
12 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah. So go for it. Give us your moment.
Yeah. Well, good morning. Welcome. Yeah. Oh, I'm pretty loud, right? Can you guys hear me? Or should I? Okay. Yeah. So. My most, I kind of came to this music and learned about it through jamming, right? I was a classically trained violinist, and I remember my first kind of aha moment was at Wintergrass Festival out in Tacoma, Washington, and people were just jamming everywhere, and I was like, somebody had given me a free ticket, and then somebody handed me a fiddle, and they were like, oh, well, do you play like Angelina Baker? And I was like, I can do that, and I just think that whole kind of sharing this common language of music and not having any other, experience with these people that I'd never met before, and just being able to jump in and play at a jam session was to me the magic of this type of music, right? Where it's not formal, it's not there's not sheet music. You can kind of jump in and just and play with people. So that was really magical for me, and kind of how I got into bluegrass and old time music. And so at Warren Wilson College, we host a weekly jam session, which Phil Jameson, who some of you all saw dance last night, founded maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And so, but I was just realizing, like, I kind of always thought of the weekly jam session as just a fun thing that we did. And then we were talking in our Zoom call about how that it is an important pedagogical experience for the students, right? It's not, so they have the classes where they do their beginning banjo and beginning guitar and beginning fiddle. And then we even have a beginning string band class, but this jam session is a way for them to actually practice it in sort of a more real-time setting, right? So, but I do think it's important in that kind of setting to make sure that the students and we have some community members that come join us as well, that people know what's happening, right? So it's not just, I feel like when you go into a jam session in a pub or something like that, you may not, and if you're newer to the music, you may not know exactly what's happening, or so it's a place of learning the etiquette, right? How to go about suggesting tunes, how to, we usually go over the key, or if there's any, like, if we're going to play Big Coyote, are you going to do the E minor first or the C first, so kind of talking about if there's any weird chords that's going to happen, or if it's crooked tune or something like that. And I also think it's an important place to sort of get the students to get comfortable sharing a tune, right? So instead of it having it be led by like one fiddler or something like that, we kind of go around the circle, and I try to make sure that folks that are comfortable leading a song would like to lead one. So I think it's also a really important place to build confidence and build those skills for being able to, like, okay, play some taters, you know what I mean? Like, kick it off for us. And also, the jam that we do is very, I would say it's not bluegrass or old time. It's sort of, kind of more of a folk jam, but we like to include and focus on those kinds of music. But it's not something, so sometimes we'll be like, okay, well, let's take, who wants to take a solo on this tune? So we'll do it kind of more, I'll say, like bluegrass style, or let's all just kind of play the melody together and do it more old time style. So it's sort of another way of doing some of those learnings of, like, what is the format that we're going to use for depending on what type of song it is or what type of style we're focusing on. So it's an important learning site for us on campus, the weekly jam session. So that's kind of my experience with.
Oh, and I didn't say a really important point. We're going to keep this zippy, keep it alive, and then hopefully have a larger Q&A. We'll have a chance for y'all to join this conversation too. So don't, store up your ideas. I know y'all have them. Next person is Greg Reish. To my left, your right. He is a musician, musicologist, producer, and director of the Center for Popular Music at Middle Tennessee State University. He's an active bluegrass and old-time scholar and performer with interests in conjunto music from South Texas and son jarocho from Veracruz, Mexico. Greg.
Thank you. I just wanted to relay very quickly one of those unexpected moments that I had at Bean Blossom. I used to attend Bean Blossom. I did 9 or 10 years straight in the kind of early 2000s. And very, very late at night, I was doing the thing that Michelle is writing about, just kind of walking through the campsite to see who was still up and making music. And I heard some really fast picking going on in a kind of a dark area of the woods, and I walked back there and I sat down and I started picking along, and I heard this guitar player who was kind of opposite me, but there were very few lights around and I couldn't really see who it was, and just really, really ripping it up. And this went on for 20, 25 minutes, and I'm thinking to myself, who is this person? It's like, well, it turned out to be Michael Cleveland on the guitar.
Wow.
Sitting there in the dark at 3 a.m. and he and his band they had like a 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock a.m. flight, but they were, having played on the stage 1 or maybe 2 sets, they were still in the woods jamming at 3 in the morning, which is a kind of a dedication to the music and to the community and the experience that you don't find very much in other styles of music. I have roughly equal experience playing bluegrass and playing old-time music in my life, and I've had many observations about the differences in the jamming between those musical styles. I mean, there are some differences that are intrinsic or inherent or grow out of the genre stylistic distinctions, like the taking of solo breaks in bluegrass that doesn't typically happen in old-time jam, so that has a different dynamic. But there are other things about it, and I wanted to just talk for a moment about some of the more advanced jam situations that I've been in contrast to like the pedagogical or kind of beginner-oriented for people who are newer to the styles. The other end of the spectrum is the people who are rather accomplished in the styles, and sometimes there's a kind of a snobbery about keeping the style pure, whatever that person or that group's conception of pure might be. And in bluegrass, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I used to go to a bluegrass jam that's about 30 miles north of Atlanta called Everett's Music Barn in Sewanee, Georgia, which is a pretty famous place. And I started going there regularly early 80s. As soon as I had my driver's license, I was going up there every Saturday. And there's some really, really great and hardcore bluegrass people who jam there every Saturday night while there's actual concerts going on in the adjacent building. And there is a way that one has to prove oneself in order to be invited into a jam like that. It's pretty closed off in that situation, partly because some of those players don't necessarily want to play with beginners. They go there to be able to really play fast and play complicated stuff and so on. But also because they're purists about their conception of the style, meaning that it's bluegrass. You can't have 3 banjos. That upsets the whole notion of how each instrument's role fits into the composite whole. So if you go to one of these jams and you're not already known, then there's a certain kind of behavior that you have to undertake in order not to be a jam buster, in order to be accepted. You have to prove your mettle, in other words. And interestingly, in bluegrass, that can start with what kind of instrument you're playing. So at the Bluegrass, the Everett Brothers Music Barn in Sewanee, there used to be an older gentleman there in the days that I was going, decades ago, who's everybody just called Sarge. And I always thought he was retired military. It turns out, I learned later, he was in the Georgia Highway Patrol, a state police. But in any case, it was a fitting nickname because he was sort of the policeman of the jam. And he was the one who would sort of give you the side eye and see, well, okay, what kind of guitar is that? You know, is it something, worthwhile? Is it an old Martin or some, handmade thing that proves you're serious about this music? And if you hang around the back a little bit, the edge of the circle, if you don't screw things up too badly, maybe the Sarge will eventually give you the nod to take a break, a solo break. That's your moment to shine and to show yourself. And so the very first time I did that, I remember this vividly. The Sarge, kind of looked at my guitar, and I was playing along for a couple of songs, and then finally he gave me the break, gave me the nod to take a break, and I played a solo, and it was, I don't know what he did to indicate to the rest of the group, but there was this sort of magical opening of the circle that actually allowed me in, because I had shown, okay, I know how to play this music. In old time, more advanced jams in old time, there's a similar kind of thing that can happen. There's a big festival that many of us have been to in West Virginia every year in August called Clifftop. It's not the official name, but everybody just calls it the Clifftop Festival. And there's some jams there, old-time jams that are more open and more oriented towards beginners. And there are some jams that, if you walk up to the campsite, the people are in such a tight space physically, there's a signal to any outsiders that you're not breaking into this. These are people who know each other or respect one another and are having a chance to play together, and they don't want that messed up by beginners or people who don't know the particular versions of the tunes that they're playing and so on. So there's a different kind of policing that happens in these advanced old-time jams, which I could talk more about, but I don't want to take up too much time, so stop there.
Thanks, Greg. That's a lot there. I don't think many of us need too much introduction for Rhiannon Giddens, who's here at the end of our line. She performed here on Thursday and has more accolades and things that I can mention. So just wondered, thanks for being here. If you have any reflections, what would you bring to think about informal playing?
Yeah, thanks for letting me crash your party. Because it's interesting, because I've been thinking about this a lot and having some multiple discussions, including with Phil Jameson just yesterday. We were talking about this. It's so interesting. I was talking about it with my partner Francesco, who's from the jazz tradition. So like the similarities between jazz sessions and Irish sessions, and less with old time. I don't go to sessions. I find not knowing the rules, not knowing who's, and who's in charge really affects the tenor of a session. Is it an open session? Is it a closed session? Is it a session that, welcomes beginners? Is it a session that doesn't? Is it a session where the leader is an egomaniac, like the Sarge person, It's like, that really, and if you don't know any of that, I'm not a good enough player to insert myself, and I'm just not interested in that. So I find these are really interesting because I learned old-time music in a session-based, but in an apprenticeship. So I learned in an apprenticeship from an elder, who was 86, and me and two other guys would just go sit and have our own private session, I guess, So that's another definition of a session where we just played the tunes. And it was the same 12 tunes every week. And that's it, and there was no academization of it. That's a whole nother topic, which we don't need to get into. But the idea of you just sitting and learning, and even that is outside of what he grew up learning, because he learned the music in function, right? Because so old time music in particular is dance music, right? It's music for a function, and that function has been removed. A lot of times you just have a band, people are just playing the music, there's nobody dancing. So that's already now removed from where it started. Everybody who was playing old-time music was coming off a farm, a factory, or whatever, and they're playing the music in their free time, and sometimes they got a weekend gig and they played for a dance or whatever, or they played for the dance during the week, whatever. But it had a different functionality and a different cultural context. So already we're removed from that. So my thing about these jams, any advanced player that I play with that doesn't want to play with a beginner, I don't want to play with them anymore. Because how does the music propagate itself? And it's like, then the other thing for me, just thinking about all of this, is why do you want to play the music? There's also this idea of collecting tunes. How many tunes can I get? How many tunes can I learn? And I'm like, is that the point? Maybe it is. But that's not where it started. People had a limited repertoire usually because there were no recorders, there were no paper, and it's not to say that can't change, but the intentionality of what's happening with this music right now, I think, which is why things like this are good, is I think really necessary, because you've got now multiple generations removed from where the music came out of, which was working class, life. This music, we cannot forget, however expensive our instruments are, our educations, we cannot forget that this music came out of hardship, and it came out of people working together who didn't have anything. So that, for me, is what is missing right now. It's like, how do we connect to that without thinking that we have to go work on a farm? Because that's not authenticity. We are who we are. We're our authentic selves coming up out of, I grew up with my retired grandparents for my first part of my life who worked an acre, but I wasn't out there working that acre. I was just eating the corn, but I was living out there. So the rhythm of rural life is in my body, So I have that feeling. If you don't have that feeling, doesn't mean you can't play the music, because I didn't pull up the corn myself, doesn't mean I can't play the music, but you have to know what your positionality is within it, and be aware of that, and to accept that, and to go, now how do I want to approach this music as a learner, and I want to creep up on this jam, I just want to sit and listen for an hour. That's cool, you know what I mean? But anybody who says you can't play that, I got told so many times, there's no jigs in old time. I'm like, really? There's a lot of old timers who would say different, but it's who's the gatekeepers, right? Who are the people saying what is and what isn't? When I was coming up in North Carolina, because I'm from North Carolina, and my uncle is a bluegrass musician, because I'm mixed, and so for a long time, before I ever started playing old time, I was known as Dale's niece, and I would go to jams that had bluegrass playing, and that was my because I was related. So there's also this idea of like these communities. Where do you belong in these communities? Where do you, like, who do you know? What is your relationship with people? I think all of that really should be thought about, because this music is community-based music. That's where it came from, and I think that's where it should stay. You know, and as people use it to go perform, which obviously the Carolina Chocolate Drops did, we took Joe Thompson's music and we took it around the world, but in a sense of educational, you know, like putting it in front of people so that people knew the Black String Band, because also our experiences of these festivals was very different to everybody here. You know, there was places we didn't go because we were told, don't go here, because they don't like people who look like you, you know? So that, I think being aware of that's why I came to this, because I'm like, obviously I'm here to represent, that's my job. But it's just, you know, thinking about all of that, I think really needs to be a part of this music going forward, kind of in a very intentional way. Like in every school, like Berkeley, don't get me started on Berkeley, in every place, you know, that's teaching this music. I know you guys are doing that, you know, but it's like, where do you exist in this? What do you want from this? Where's your ego in this? You know, because for me, the best old time music has no ego in it, right? It's just like you're in it because you want to be in that music, and then what happens with it afterwards? You know, that's another question. Anyway, that's my blah.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely. All right, Pete Ward, musician and professor of practical theology. I always say it's kind of a dig at the impractical theologians, but that's okay. He's at Durham University in England. His research has focused on religion and bluegrass. Keep an eye out for his upcoming book on the subject. He performs bluegrass, old time, and English folk musics.
Thank you very much, Lee, and thank you. I've just written a book called Bluegrass and Religion, and the origins of that book is jamming, and my experience of playing music with my friends in various contexts. And one of the interesting things, particularly post "Where Brother, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," is that the gospel songs have become really a favourite repertoire for jamming, particularly in the UK, France, where I've been. And what's interesting about those songs is that they're nearly all gospel songs of one kind or another. What piqued my curiosity as a theologian was being with people who I knew a little of their lives, who I didn't see as particularly religious, some perhaps anti-religious, who would say something like, let's sing "I Went Down to the River to Pray." And everyone would go, yeah, let's sing that. And I'd be thinking as a theologian, now what's going on here? What does this mean to people? And so I set up a project. The first thing I did was put a website out with a questionnaire with some songs on it, and I asked what people thought of those songs. I had one response: "Keep on the sunny side of life." This is a very cheerful song with a very morbid religious end. And then one person said, "Will the circle be unbroken?" Sadly, the circle will be broken because some people have not found faith and won't be there at the end. So even in those two responses, you've got this diversity of a kind of struggling with the religious element in the music and a kind of the religious element in the music affirming what people believe. And I think one of the things as I did my interviews with a whole bunch of people was what seems clear is that in a jamming context, particularly with the gospel elements in bluegrass, we probably have people with such a diversity of responses, sitting next door to each other, singing the same songs, loving the songs, and yet having a different kind of response, I think. One person said to me, if it gets too Jesus-y, I have to hold my nose. So I thought was terribly interesting. But there's another side to it, and that is, I think, the experience of something else beyond. I think one of the questions in my mind is, why do these particularly religious songs play such an important role in the genre? And I think it's because a lot of my respondents said I don't necessarily believe this, but it's what people believed in the past. And they respected the songs because of what it believed in the past. I was also interested in, I think the idea of resonance might be a useful idea. Some sense that something from the past resonates in the present as we perform these songs. In other words, whilst there might be a diversity of religious experience and belief in the room, there's something that happens because these songs are religious and spiritual that communicates in the songs over time. And that's a non-specific affect, a feeling, emotional feeling from the past that comes as people sing those songs. The final thing I'd like to say is that nearly everyone I interviewed and a lot of the literature tries to make out that this music, or does make out, that the old time and bluegrass music is special. There's a mythic element to that. It comes from Ireland and it goes to the mountains, or it's all from Appalachia and it's from the roots, or all of these things. And that sense that what's going on is special is something that most people feel about the music. One of the issues is, I think, the music carries mythic and ideological elements over time. And those mythic and ideological elements have both been they've been destructive of society as well as constituting societies. And part of the role of rethinking the music, I think, is beginning to ask, okay, we're being moved by this, but what's the link between being moved, affect, and power, and issues of race, identity, gender, and so on? But the religious element plays a key role in all of that, I think. Just to give you one idea, if you think that your home was in a cabin in the mountains, and that when you die, heaven is a place primarily where you're restored to your family. In other words, heaven is a cabin in the hills where you meet your mother and father. Ideologically, there's nothing more powerful because it affirms particular distinctive identities. It's my family in my heaven. It's not necessarily a Christian theology of all nations being reconciled, of justice, of a place where rights are wronged. No, it's a sort of affirming thing of a particular kind of identity. And so these mythic elements in the music have been are problematic and need to be rethought and re-expressed, even as they move us. And I think, finally, I would say, one of the things that's interesting is that, and we hope to do a project on Britain and Ireland, Lee, and myself and some others, is that as this music moves out of the United States, the particular racial conflicts and cultural issues that gave birth to and have been part of that music are relocated in different worlds. Lee's work on Czech Republic shows that. The music has different meanings in these different places. And actually that might be a really helpful thing to speak back, to say, well, it means this to me, but it's not about that, you know. I had one, no, I'll finish that.
Thanks, Pete. That's a lot to think about. These are ultimate concerns. Next, here, we've thinking more about the American kind of stuff. It's not all about that. So Conor Caldwell, he's a fiddle player from Belfast. He currently serves as course director for the MA in Irish Traditional Music Performance at the Irish World Academy in the University of Limerick. And his research explores various aspects of music in Ireland, including style, structure, and form in traditional performance. And as he said when we met with him and the students on Tuesday, what is Irish? What is traditional? What is music? He's thinking about all this stuff.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. Glad to be your token traddy for the morning here. Throw in a few Irish elements. And it's also terrible to go last in these panel discussions because everyone's made all the good points. Like, there's no point being prepared, but hopefully you respond to a few things that have been said here. I thought it was really interesting to come on to some of those ideological concerns. And I suppose people have made mostly a lot of positive points about the session environment in general. And I might come on to maybe look at how we might problematize this session, like how we look at what some of the current issues that scholars are talking about in Irish session playing, particularly around gender and participation and so on. Certainly that issue of ideology has come up in a couple of books in the last decade, that Irish traditional music can sometimes be seen to be part of maybe a more nefarious nationalist identity, which can be exclusionary. You know, I think some people outside of the traditional music movement can see it that way. And certainly the barriers to participate in sessions in Ireland are somewhat the same as has been described already here this morning. So that kind of barrier to beginners trying to join and maybe not understanding the level of some of the other players that they're trying to participate with. You see then some master musicians might move their instruments to other tunings, or take out a set of B pipes or tune their fiddle to E flat, and that sort of that takes care of it. Yeah, we've got a piper over in the corner. He's known to do that. I was at a session in Inishmean a few years back, and that certainly happened. A couple of musicians who were at a very high level, they decided to take the session to a different space, and it was quite exclusionary. But I mean, sessions can be very welcoming too, and I just wanted to make note of one of the first sessions I ever participated in Donegal, which is where I learned a lot of my music in a community which is really dominated by fiddles. I mean, there's not really a preponderance of many other instruments in the Donegal traditional music community, and it has been that way for around a century. But I knew about 2.5 tunes, and I could play them at a snail's pace. And I sat in on the session, and everyone was flying, and it was great, and I was, in every break between the tunes, I was trying to play like the 3 notes of one of the jigs that I could play, and then this amazing musician called Martin McGinley took up my couple of notes, and he played the tune, and he looked at me, and I was looking at him going, I don't recognize the tune that I was playing, because it was so fast, and then when it was finished, someone patted me on the back and said, that's the one you were playing, Conor, and I was like, right, okay. So that's something that always stuck with me in the years since, that, as a couple of other people said, I think as Rhiannon said too, I'm always conscious of the fact that the young person on the edge of the session is trying to have their little piece of the action, and it's how empowering it is for young people to get to join in, even if it's a tune that you really, really don't want to play, and you have to really adapt your own style, and it interrupts the flow of the session, that sometimes it's really important to just have that moment with someone and give them the confidence to come back the next time. So yeah, the session in an Irish context is very, very useful for learning. One of the things I always describe to learners is, I see 3 stages. So the first stage is playing for yourself, so just playing in the house. Everybody starts there. The second stage is playing with others, and that's where the session comes in. So it's that joy you get and the improvement you get from playing along with people who are setting the pace for you, and you have to learn how to play a bit faster or play different versions of the tunes. And then not as many, in fact, much fewer people get to the final stage, which is playing for other people in a performance context. But I think the vast majority of musicians in Irish traditional music coalesce around that session thing. That's where everyone's aiming to get. That's where we have the most participation, the most enjoyment. But there are issues with sessions in Ireland. Adam Call, he's an ethnomusicologist, talks about the commoditization of the Irish session. So this relationship that develops between a pub landlord and the musicians. And it can be quite an exploitative relationship, because it's essentially a 0-hours contract for a non-negotiable fee. And if the landlord doesn't want you the next Saturday, he says, sorry, no session this week, and you have no work if you're a professional musician. So that's problematic, and it also creates then a hierarchy within the pubs where there are these 2 or 3 core musicians who have it's their personal fiefdom, and they can dictate what is played, how it's performed, who's welcome, who can start a tune, and so on and so forth. And then there are also issues, I think, increasingly discussed around gender in Irish traditional music, and an American scholar called Tess Slaminski wrote a book recently outlining her experience of trying to participate in Irish traditional music and found it very problematic. Helen O'Shea, an Australian fiddle player, wrote a book in 2010 that outlined some of the same issues. And I think ultimately then in the last couple of years, research from Una Monaghan, who's really spearheaded the Misha Fosta movement, the Irish traditional equivalent of the Me Too movement, where she told the stories of over 100 musicians who had experienced very discomforting scenarios in traditional sessions and in the tradition more generally. And just this chimes with something I think that Rhiannon said earlier, just to quote one of them. One of the respondents, number 29, said, "The amount of stamina and brass neck I think you need to have as a female to persevere, to become admitted to that world is more than I have or have time to muster up. You never get any encouragement. It's a macho scene. I've been left with a bitter taste in my mouth many times, and with sadness have allowed my talent to dissipate somewhat and no longer really bother with sessions or anything like that." So these are the lived experience of many musicians who are at a very high standard, who feel that socially they just can't break into this scene. So I think it's important when we're talking about a lot of the positives of traditional session playing in Ireland, and it's great crack. And I don't know how many people have seen the Tommy Tiernan skit about the traditional session, where he talks about this moment where it feels like we're all about to blast into outer space, and then someone sings a really sad song, and it just kind of disappears out the window, you know. So it's important when we're talking about the positive moments of the session that we remember that there are people who have a variety of experiences trying to engage with traditional sessions, and I'll maybe leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Conor. And now you're not the last, because I really wanted to include. We talked to Frida. We had a really good conversation in the prep, and with Tim Rogers as well, because I think jamming is a really big part of this festival. And so I'm curious to know. I wanted to talk more with the organizers or people who are involved with the festival. How do you all think about jamming as a part of this festival? So and do y'all want to say anything about that? How do you all think about? Because we are talking with our students. We're training them. We're trying to give them contexts, launch them into the playing with others. So maybe they can play for others, but at least that they can do the music thing. So, but y'all are doing that as well. Y'all are framing the experience that people have of this music in the festival. So I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I'd say it's not. It's something we're very mindful of, that people, when they come to a festival, they want to jam. Where can we jam? There's a lot of attention being paid to the early stages of accessing jams as this kind of, exciting sacred space that you want to get involved in. And it's really difficult at times to just facilitate that in an intentional way, I can relate to what Rhiannon says, I play a lot at the festival with friends. You get to a stage in your kind of musical development where you don't arrive at a session where you don't know anyone anymore, because you know enough people that you just wind up playing with friends. So we try to create like a community feeling where people can meet each other and then play together. We've toyed with the idea of hosting slow jams. I've done some of that in the UK. I think that's a really great way to get people playing. Like when I started playing this music in this country, it was very much a minority sport. It was pre-Oh Brother, and I'm an American person who's lived here longer than I've lived in America, and there weren't that many of us. So it was this kind of sense that you just knew each other. You hear about each other, and that's one of the cool things that happens here. Is people walk up to you and say, "You're so and so." There's also a whole new thing in kind of traditional music which didn't exist certainly when the traditions were old. But when I was coming up, which is the internet. Let's not forget the kind of internet is present at every jam session. Like as a friend of mine said in this town, he says, every musical disaster that ever happened in Westport is now on YouTube. So I don't have an academic background, but I did study traditional music in my primary degree, traveled to Appalachia, and I traveled here, and I was lucky enough and privileged enough to just get credit for it, you know. And that was about the difference between performance music and social music, okay? And Rhiannon pointed that out. I was doing an independent study working for a big rock and roll band, who are superstars now, we lived together, and then I kind of was more interested in sitting at people's kitchen tables, you know? But there is that thing now, if you be friends and you start having a jam, there's a circle of this going on around you, you know? And it just becomes something different. Like, we're not performing, we're socializing. No, we're performing, no, we're socializing. So it's a very complex thing. We just try to, like, create a space where everybody sounds, you know, and forgive my language, but, you know, don't be a dick. And if someone is, you know, being uncool, they should be called out on it, you know? And we don't agree with the tune police, and we don't like this idea of trying to find some toilet in the corner so you can have a jam where no one bothers you, you know? Like, you know, try to be inclusive and try to make it happen. And basically, it's a field of dreams situation. You bring enough musicians to any town, there's going to be jams, you know? And that's kind of our philosophy, I think. Frida?
Well, I think you said it all in terms of the philosophy around the festival, but I remember when we had the chat on Zoom, it was in terms of the programming, you know, often people would say to us on Saturday, how come there's not much down on Saturday night on the programme? Is it to allow for that to happen? So on Friday night, people are fresh into town, they're not really sure where to go. People are becoming more familiar with it now, but you know, so the concert is on and people come here and they gravitate here, and we've got 5 bands around town on Saturday. They're like, there's only a couple of things I'm going, but there'll be loads of music. It's just not programmed, and that's to allow for that to happen. Just, I suppose, listen to everybody. It's just, it sparks off so many thoughts here. My background is fully Irish traditional music, and it's interesting, Rhiannon, when you said about, you know, you're this phenomenal musician that we're all here in awe of, and you said, I don't feel good enough to play in a session. And this, it blew my mind, because actually I would see in our traditional setting that people who don't feel good enough to go on stage find the session an okay space. It's a safe space to go in and share your music, because you're not exposed. And you know what you were talking about, taking the lead in the session, you know, we let the fiddle take the lead or let somebody take the lead. We don't really do that in Irish traditional musician. It's very much a shared experience. And we had this conversation, I think it was you, Tim, there's a lot of conversations happening just about, you know, if somebody takes the lead in an Irish traditional session, and so for me, if I start a tune, if something sparks up, I'm going to play this tune, and nobody else joins in. If they don't know it, I'm like, oh Jesus, change quick. Get into something so we bring it back to the core, like the tunes that we know somebody will play and join in with. So that's just one thing. But also interesting when you started with the bluegrass and religion. If we go back to the history of Irish music, and you were saying, Rhiannon, about like it coming from the working class. All of our music back in the day took place in houses and on streets and corners and crossroads, and actually it was the Catholic Church who came in and decided, you're having too much fun here now and we can't control this. So like we don't know what's going on here. So the whole Public Dance Hall Act came here, and it changed the sound of our music for quite a while. That it went from the informal session in the house where they were drinking illegal poaching and home brews and whatever else was going on, and then they created the sound for the public. So we didn't have the amplification. So they brought in the piano, they brought in the drums to make this big sound for our dancing. And all our music is about dancing and share. But that went from in the houses and on the streets to this, and then the session came back. We came back then. But most of our sessions now take place in the public houses as opposed to in the private houses. So we've changed how things are going. The Keeleys are still happening, the performances are still happening. That's totally not what you asked me. So
No, that's great. You know, last year I was on the hill behind McGing's, and there was a guy back there, and he had his good times. Talk about, you know, the visual instrument, you know, the physical culture. You could see. I was tracking with him. He was he was really inebriated because he was trying to like be okay where he was. And he said, "This is my first session. I've been learning banjo online." He sounded Irish to me, I'm not sure. But I just thought that was so, I was like, brother, you're entering a world of pain or a world of joy, or probably both. But we watched it happen right there. It was his first playing music with other people. It was really interesting to see him go over that. So it's so fun that so many people are having transformative musical experiences here, and y'all are helping frame those experiences in powerful
Yeah,
ways.
I'm sorry now, I'm jumping in, but I think that is a really key thing. And I remember myself learning music as a child, going to music lessons, and we went and we learned every week and you practiced. And I used to see my older brother, who had more freedom, going off and having great crack. I want a bit of that. So that kept me playing. I didn't really want to practice. I didn't really want to do this, but I kept going because I saw there will be fun here out of this. And then I remember at the age of maybe 16, given that bit more freedom to go off with just my friends and joining the session where, I suppose, and then I grew up in an area where there wasn't so much music. So we were brought in to play at the school concert and to play at confirmation and to play at mass and to play at all these things. So it was very much, here, and we were a little bit nerdy, me, I know you can't believe it. We were like, playing this traditional music, you weren't cool. And then I went to, a music festival and I went into the session and there was lads with long hair from Dublin and I said, these are cool, hold on a second, this is actually cool. I don't mind those ones at home who have this impression, but it changed my mindset. And I was like, it opened up a whole new world then. I was like, this is fun. So the importance of the session, going from that, and I work a lot with young people in music, and you're trying to give them opportunities to learn, and that's really, really important because you have to learn, you have to master your instrument, but then it's a really, really important transition to the social element of the whole music sharing and friendships that you make. So.
Absolutely.
Lee, I just want to say something, and I'm sorry I'm crashing the discussion.
No, it's Q&A time.
No, but
Uri, what would you want to say?
I just wanted to say that at my university, I never finished school, so I'm sorry that I'm interrupting your academic discussion. But just to say, and to bring it home into our festival, as the producer and the programmer of the festival, one of the big things for us, that people that come to the festival, they see these sessions, and they see this session going forever, and they think that we create, but is you the musician credit. There's Tim Rogers did a session for 12 hours. And people were going in and out the pub, and every few minutes, every few hours, they're still playing. I care for the barman that had to hear 6 fiddles going for 12 hours. And then one of my favorite stories, many, many years ago, we brought a band here called the Loose Smooth String Band for Liverpool. I think they played for about 72 hours or something. From the minute they came to Westport till 3 days later, every time you looked at them, they played music. And when people come to us, and for you as a musician, what you've given to us as a non-musician, that we see you play all the time, we can't get over it. We just think this is the greatest thing, the greatest present ever given to us. So sorry.
Well, we do want to leave time for the second hour, which is actually going to involve musical activity. But do folks have questions or observations elsewhere in the room? We have a lot of folks here who are thinking about this stuff and doing it.
Just nearly everybody highlighted some of the difficulties, and I'm not a musician by the way, but nearly everybody highlighted the difficulties with performance versus participation. And there's lots of very interesting solutions. Nobody offered a solution. Does anybody have a solution, a way of correcting that, so that people are encouraged to participate rather than be observers?
Well, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, because I feel like it is part of the ill of our society, is that we've extracted art from the everyday and commodified it so that you have to go to work to get money to then pay for the art that has been taken out of your own life, which I find very problematic. And it's something that's really, like, as I go on as a musician, as a professional musician, I think about it more and more. And I've talked to other people, like, who, Natalie Merchant, people who are thinking about this in a larger sense of where some of our mental health crises coming from. I think part of it is because we don't participate in our own art making. Everybody here is a musician. I've led so many workshops for singers, and people come in and they go, well, I'm not really a singer, or I can't carry a tune. And I'm like, there's like a minuscule percentage of people who actually can't carry a tune. You just haven't been allowed to hear yourself. Somebody told you when you were 7 or 12 or 15. I've seen people with tears in their eyes, a teacher who said something, well, maybe you should not sing. And it stays with them until they're 55, 67, 82, right? These are like wounds from our childhood. And so it's a lot to fix that, right? Because it's a societal thing. It has to be part of a larger movement back to community, back to knowing our neighbors, back to participating in each other's lives rather than Netflix. Nothing wrong with Netflix, you know, but like it has taken too much of our spirits, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons why people respond to this music, because it came from a period of people making connections in unbelievable circumstances, you know? So what I do as a musician is I always have a sing song in every concert. So I get people to sing, and it's something that's really easy. And if you don't know it, you'll know it by the end of the first verse, right? That's something that I do in my concerts. What I've started to do in my tours is, like, I thought about Joe Thompson, who was my mentor, didn't charge us for playing with us. He was delighted when we came, and we sat and he played and he gave his time. So I don't ever want to charge anybody to learn his music. So I've started doing, when I go back home, Joe Jams with Justin Robinson, and we just sit and anybody can come play the tunes. And we just sit and play the tunes. And with my band, now we've had a couple of, you know, we just say the day before or the day of, we're going to do a jam, we're going to be here. And we always work with the local person, you know, to reach out to the people. And so anybody can come join, and we just get in a circle and we play, and there's no charge, there's none of that. And then, like, the people walking by, you know, could come in and sing or whatever. So we're trying to do that from our places as quote-unquote professional musicians. You know, I'm sure other people have solutions, but it's going to take a lot of recognition that this is something that we need a bigger, you know, piece of. Something like this is good too, you know?
I identify completely with what you're saying. I'm not a musician, but I do participate in shape note singing.
You are a musician, then.
Okay, but one of the reasons that works, I think, for people is that it doesn't happen in pubs, so it's not performative. And the traditional way of saying to somebody, I don't know if this could happen in a sort of bluegrass setting, that if you feel if you hear the guy next to you singing a wrong note, it's probably because you're not singing loud enough. And that's, so everybody's encouraged to sing out and use your voice and use it as much as possible. And if that could be brought into the kind of, and it would avoid some of the elitism, I think, that you guys are focusing on, if that spirit could be brought forward.
Absolutely. Like the jam that we did in Seattle, we did outside. There's also something about being outside, because you can't even hear that great. You know what I mean? So it's just like, you got to get in, and it's just like, who cares? Just play the music, you know? I think we have to make concerted efforts, you know, to really, people who are at a certain, I'm at a level where I can do that. You know, I can pull people together and I can go, like, my band was all for it, you know, but there, you know, if you're working hard, blah, 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 you may not have the energy to do that. So we all have to kind of do what we can when we can. But people who've gotten to a certain place cannot, they have to go back down and give back, I think.
Maybe at the risk of arguing for codifying lots of things, but I do think, like, the slow jam idea, which you're seeing more and more at festivals, is really helping. So Belfast Trad Fest in my city, after the classes every day, there's a 2-hour slot, and it's really aimed at musicians who are, say, between 8 and 16, but is also open to adults and people of all ages. And there's one of the teachers then stays behind to facilitate the session, and the idea is that you ask each person in the group, doesn't matter what level they're at, to start a tune, and everyone joins in. And then as the facilitator, you try to think of what the kind of common repertoire between all those people would be. And I find that really effective, and they're very well attended. And the good thing is then that connects people at the same stage of development, the same stage of learning, to go and start their own initiatives outside of that as well. So yeah, quite recently we had then I think 3. So one of the things that happens quite a lot in Irish traditional music is we get people who have a classical music background who have stopped playing classical music at 21, 22, and then put the fiddle in the wardrobe for 8 years and realize what a terrible mistake they've made, and they're trying to find a pathway back to playing music. So they'll start to come to festivals, engage through those kind of slow jams, and then meet each other and go off and start their own sessions, and I think that ends up being quite an organic way to solve this problem, that people connect with one another at the same stage of the learning journey. It's not perfect, but it's a solution or part of a solution, I think.
Can I say something else? I think there's a tradition here of the sing-song, which I think is fabulous. I mean, it is dying in a lot of places, you know, but like really instead of like going out to the pub tonight, why don't I invite people to my house? We have a few drinks and then like just sit in a circle, start chatting and like just sing a freaking song, sing it. And I've heard people do like songs from the 80s or whatever, a cappella. You know what I mean? That's their party piece, you know? And I think that's a beautiful tradition because you hear from everybody and you hear from multiple generations. So it's like starting it yourself. And maybe it's awkward the first time or the second time or the third time, but just kind of keeping at it because it gives people an opportunity to reconnect to that. I'm making this music and I'm like doing it in front of people that I'm safe with. So I think that could be that anybody could do anytime. It's just giving up that, that Friday night out at the pub, just go, hey, why don't you come, let's do something different. I don't know.
To make the point that it's a really challenging thing for Ireland in particular, because I came up going to festivals, selling records at festivals in the States, went to a lot of them. They tended to be outside, they tended to be in a field or a campground or kind of a fairgrounds or whatever. The first time I came to, we're going to go to the Bluegrass Festival. There was one, back in the mid-90s, and we arrived in a town in the Midlands, and I was like, "Where's the festival?" It's here. And I said, "What do you mean?" And it just takes place in pubs. So that kind of creating there is an intimidating, to sing a song where there are strangers present is intimidating. Yeah. And we've all been there. Anyone who's played traditional music has had to go into a situation where they don't know most people or any people, and then everyone's looking at them, and that's a unnecessary challenge, That's why we have workshops, and that's why you want to have slow jams, and that's why I want to create. Because in a workshop, it's you're there to learn, whereas if someone's pointing their phone at you, it's quite different, So it's a real challenge, and I think it's a real challenge to young traditional musicians because, the traditional music has been commodified that way. They don't play it at home. They don't get together at the kitchen table. It's in the boozer,
I think we got to call out the phones too. I tried at this jam. I was like, I did the sing song, where everybody's, not the sing song, but the sing along. And I said, put your phone down. Put your phone down. About half the people did it. You can't slap it out of their hands even though I want to, But it's like, I think if we just kind of keep at it and just be like, no phones, just put it down. Here's a moment, have the phone, put it down.
In the folk club, there's a friend of mine and I set up here in Bluegrass Folk Club. And that was first day in a common agreement, be here now. What happens in the folk club stays in the folk club. Keep your phone in your pocket, because it just changed it.
Absolutely.
It's changed it.
I think we got time for one more. Thought we have one person here. Yeah.
Sure. So, to the point about playing music together, my mother lived to be 92, and her best memory was of her family coming together, her extended family coming together and playing music together. They all played different instruments. So to the extent that families can do that, and with our own family, my son plays the banjo and his uncle plays the guitar. His uncle's a trumper, just like my sister. And we are not, but guess what? At Christmas we get together and the two of them play. And it brings them together in a very special way. We have to find those connections to heal the other wounds and to show us what we have in common. So it's a precious gift.
Amen. Well, we're going to take a short break. We're going to shuffle around. We're going to move this table. We're going to get some musical instruments out. Uri wanted me to remind folks.